Good morning and welcome to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. I am Adam Rank. That is Kimmy Checks. That down there is Marcus Grant getting you ready for Week 11. But Kim, how you living?
Hi guys, happy Sunday, happy Week 11. I hope your weekends were good. I got my Christmas tree up. I'm in the holiday mood. You know, listening to some Charlie Brown soundtrack. We're so close to the fantasy playoffs. I'm so excited. Marcus, how was your weekend? How are you? Happy Sunday.
Your blatant disrespect of Thanksgiving is frustrating me right now. There's a whole holiday before you get to the next one. I say that as somebody who was talked into putting up some Christmas lights around the house yesterday, so I guess I'm being a little bit hypocritical right now.
Oh my gosh, the wife Rosie McGee is the biggest Thanksgiving stan of all time. And if you want to hit her up on Twitter to talk about Thanksgiving, you can do that. But if you want to hit us up for some fantasy questions, be sure to add us at NFL Fantasy. And if you're watching the show on YouTube at youtube.com/NFL, you can chat with our own Michael F. Florio, who is sitting there answering your questions, looking pretty dapper. Love the t-shirt look. Kind of a David Duvall thing from the 90s. I don't know. I think he looks good. Be nice to him because I'm the only one who can be mean to him. But let's get to the news of the day, or the news of the week, I should say. Sean Payton kind of shocked the world this week when he, I think, alluded to. I think people have been reporting it. But it looks like Taysom Hill is going to be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints this week and not Jameis Winston, who replaced Drew Brees last week. Drew Brees, of course, will not be playing on Sunday. So, Marcus, I ask you, what do we make of this news?
Look, I guess we go with Taysom Hill is the starter. I think the only real question for a lot of us is, does this mean he plays all four quarters at quarterback, or do we see Jameis Winston roll in there sometime? Now, look, I don't think anybody has the real answer to that. I know they asked Bruce Arians, not that Bruce Arians really has a say in this, but he thinks both guys are going to play. It would be on brand for Sean Payton to troll us like this, but I think you might be safe, though. If you have Jameis, you might just be safe for leaving him on the bench, sad as that may sound.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was funny. Once this news came out, it's like we all saw the meme of Jameis Winston earlier this season where he was holding the Microsoft Surface tablet and he was just staring at the screen. It's like that's exactly what my reaction was when this news came out, because I'm just blankly staring in the direction of Jameis Winston. I think some of us who are in some leagues out of the fantasy playoffs, I know I have a league where my record is horrible. It's like if I want to do a YOLO play and just put Jameis in, hoping that he's going to take over some snaps for Taysom, I'm going to do it because I think the matchup is so good against the Falcons. But again, it's Sean Payton just classically trolling us. I do think both guys will seize time, but I don't think I'm advocating to start either of them confidently.
On this day of 2020, Sean Payton has ushered in the quarterback by committee. What are you going to do? Jameis Winston would have been such a great start too. But anyways, let's take a look at the notable actives and inactives for this week. A reminder, there's 7 early games, 5 late games, including Sunday Night Football. Let's take a look right here. Teddy Bridgewater, Christian McCaffrey, both inactive for the Carolina Panthers this week. Some bad news for Detroit as well. Kenny Golladay, DeAndre Swift will not be playing, but Matthew Stafford is ready to go. Damian Harris active, as is Sony Michel this week for the New England Patriots. And, of course, the Bengals placed Joe Mixon on IR, which means that Giovanni Bernard is once again going to get this start. And I know he's got a tough matchup with the Washington FT, but Giovanni Bernard has been pretty good. But I do want to focus in for a moment on this situation in Carolina, because Teddy Bridgewater, there's a lot of confusion on the internet this morning. You might have heard a bunch of different stories. Teddy Bridgewater is not active. He's not going to be the emergency quarterback or anything like that. PJ Walker is going to be the starter. PJ Walker, who is that, you might ask? He was a quarterback at Temple when Matt Rule was there. He played in the XFL. Marcus, how do you feel about, I don't know, people are starting Taysom Hill. Would you start PJ Walker today?
I don't think I would start PJ Walker today. We at least have seen a little bit more of Taysom Hill. We sort of understand kind of how the Saints use him. I know my kid is not all that excited about starting PJ Walker either. So I think we'd stay away. I think the bigger question is that, I also get nervous about Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. Yeah. Maybe Curtis Samuel still has some value, but the pass catchers I'm worried about.
Kim, are you going to YOLO it? Are you going to YOLO with PJ Walker? You want to go Taysom Hill? Why not?
No, I would YOLO with Jameis Winston. I don't know if I'm going to YOLO with PJ Walker. Like Marcus kind of alluded to, we understand how Taysom Hill plays the game, right? We've seen his usage in games even when Drew Brees was there. I don't have enough confidence in PJ Walker to go full YOLO, but who knows? Maybe in the hour of the show, you guys can change my mind and I'll just YOLO play and put him in a lineup.
All right, now we've got some work to do during the breaks, but I do want to talk about the Lions as well because – you know, we were looking at a situation where DeAndre Swift was going to be the lead running back. Everybody was excited. This was going to be a huge opportunity. Great matchup today against the Carolina Panthers as well. Ian Rappaport has said, of course, with DeAndre Swift being out, that there's going to probably be a split between Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson. So, Kim, why don't we start with you? Which one of these running backs would you start this week?
I would start the one that I stupidly dropped 2 weeks ago because I thought DeAndre Swift was the lead back. That's Adrian Peterson, but I was lucky enough because you fools didn't go pick him up after I dropped him, so I'm going to roll with Adrian Peter this Sunday. Like you said, it's actually a really good matchup against the Carolina Panthers because they're allowing the fourth most fantasy points per game to running backs this season, and they've also allowed a top 25 fantasy running back in every game this season. Now, I don't think Adrian Peterson has the same upside that DeAndre Swift saw because I think a lot of the points that he scores were from that red zone opportunities of him getting into the end zone. I hope Adrian Peterson can fill some of that void, but I definitely trust him way more than Kerryon Johnson in this matchup.
I'm with Kimmy on this one. I think it's Adrian Peterson. I do think Kerryon's going to come in and get some work. He'll probably get a few targets here or there, but I would imagine we're going to see AD get most of the work in this game, and that Panther run defense has not been good all year long. So this could actually, weirdly, this game might take about 90 minutes, right? Because I think both sides, with their quarterback situations and their running back situations, I think they're just going to run the football. Like, they may be out of here before, lunchtime on the West Coast. Who knows?
Yeah, it feels that way. I will say, too, if you're in a situation where you need a running back, and obviously Adrian Peterson would be the first running back that I would pick up, but last night I found myself in a couple of positions where I'm like, I got to pick up Kerryon Johnson. Like, I don't want to do it, but I just know it's the right thing to do. Like, hey, we've all been in those situations before. Somebody you don't like got a promotion. You're like, hey, good job. You kind of got to go with it. That's what I'm doing with Kerryon Johnson in a couple of spots. Now, a reminder, too, with the late games, the inactives come in around 2:30, right? Eastern time, 11:30 here on the West Coast. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Twitter at NFL Fantasy. We'll have you set up and ready to go. Let's check out right now. Time now for 15 for 15, presented by Geico. We're going to be starting, let's be talking about some of our favorite starts at every position because it's Sunday Fun Day! Love it. All right, let's start at the quarterback position. Let's take a look at the board, the starting board. Ben Roethlisberger, I got there. Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, trying to breathe that into, I'm starting him over Aaron Rodgers today, so I got to kind of make myself feel better about this. Alex Smith, Kirk Cousins. But Marcus, let's talk about that for a moment. Justin Herbert, I'm doing the right thing by starting him this week.
You are doing the right thing by starting Justin Herbert this week, even with a less than optimal haircut. Look, the guy's just been playing well all year long since he was thrown into the deep end of the pool after Tyrod Taylor's injury. He's just done great things all season long. He's got a good matchup against the Jets. We know he likes to funnel targets to some very good pass catchers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So you should feel pretty good about starting him this week.
Okay, Justin Herbert, you and your haircut, don't disappoint. We did Fantasy Bites on Thursday, and we had an Adam Rank rant, and Rank lost his mind and said that Justin Herbert's haircut was a cry for help. You guys should go watch that.
It is.
It was amazing. But a quarterback that was on your board that I'm pretty hyped about this week, Rank, is Big Ben. He's going up against Jacksonville, and this is a fun start for me. He's a guy who actually I'd be more comfortable starting over someone like Deshaun Watson this week, which sounds crazy, but Big Ben is coming off 2 straight games where he's had over 25 fantasy points. He's also finished as a top 7 quarterback in both of those games these last few weeks. He's had 2+ passing touchdowns in 8 games this season. That's tied for second most in the league. Plus, it's a favorable matchup because Jacksonville is allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks since week 4. And it's interesting because a few weeks ago, once I saw his first 25-plus fantasy point performance, I was wondering why he wasn't started in more leagues. He had a 24% increase this week. He's being started in 84% of leagues. 2 weeks ago, it was only less than 60%. So obviously, people are starting to pay attention. I think because Josh Allen is out on a bye this week, a lot of people had to head to the waiver wire and get some other quarterbacks plugged in. But I do expect big things from Big Ben this Sunday.
I'm with you on that one. Let's take a look now at the running back position, some of the must-starts for this week. And Damian Harris, I know that Sonny Michel is expected to play, and he's going to be in the mix, but Damian Harris has been pretty consistent. Savon Ahmed, I believe, is a great start later on this afternoon against the Denver Broncos. Nyheim Hines is another guy that I will be looking at. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Duke Johnson. But Kimmy, I want to talk a little bit about Antonio Gibson because this seems like one of the most under-the-radar stud running backs in the league. How do you like him this week?
Oh, I love him this week. It's funny. I got a question on Twitter of like, do I start Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, or Antonio Gibson? I'm like, have you been watching football? You start Antonio Gibson, especially against the Bengals. He's had 7 rushing touchdowns in the last 8 games. I think both him and J.D. McKissick are good starts.
I like the Antonio Gibson start a lot.
Top 10 fantasy running backs in 3 of the last 4 games. So I don't know. I'm all about Antonio Gibson. I've been on this hype train, and I'm going to keep it up.
I think that's a good hype train to be on. Absolutely. I'm going to jump on the Nyheim Hines hype train right now. I got all excited and started rolling along. Nyheim Hines is the one guy in this Indianapolis backfield that has a pretty solid static role. So he's the guy where while we're trying to figure out what to do with Jonathan Taylor or Jordan Wilkins, Nyheim Hines is still going to get his opportunities, especially in the passing game. The Packers have struggled against running backs all year long. And right now, Hines looks like he's playing the best out of anybody in that group. So if you're asking me to pick a Colts running back, it is easily Nyheim Hines for me.
No, I understand that. Frank Reich even extended an olive branch to fantasy enthusiasts saying that he wanted to feature Nyheim Hines this week. So this is your one opportunity, Frank, if you want us to believe you moving forward. Let's take a look at the wide receiver position if we could here in just a second. I don't know about the Colts wide receivers, but love Chase Claypool this week. Travis Fulgham is a guy that I like a lot. I'm going to be the idiot who continues to start Hollywood Brown. I think that that's a pretty good option. Jerry Jeudy has been coming along, very solid. T. Higgins. And I like both Cowboys receivers this week. I like Amari Cooper and I like CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb was the most targeted receiver when Andy Dalton was the quarterback. But you'll see, Marcus, I've got Travis Fulgham there. How do you feel about his teammate, Jalen Reagor?
I feel pretty good about Jalen Reagor, and I know the weather in Cleveland is going to be pretty nasty today. They're expecting a lot of rain. Hopefully it's not too windy because that's more of what affects the passing game. But even if it is, the way they use Reagor, they move him around, they find different ways to get the ball in his hands, sort of like what the Ravens should be doing with Hollywood Brown, but I digress. Anyway, I still think even if the weather's not great, they'll figure out how to put the ball in his hands and just sort of let him work in space. And especially working out of the slot, the Browns have struggled to cover that area of the field. So I do think Reagor, I think Fulgham could have a good game too, but I definitely like Jalen Reagor.
Okay, Jalen Reagor, big things expected. Rank, this was a guy who was not on your board, but I'm feeling it because it's a revenge game against the Patriots. It's Brandon Cooks. Earlier, I said that I would actually be more comfortable starting Big Ben over his quarterback, Deshaun Watson. And even though I have a little bit of a worry about Deshaun Watson, I do think that Brandon Cooks is going to have a breakout game. Now, he lost Super Bowl 52 with the Patriots versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Then he lost Super Bowl 53 versus the Patriots with the Rams. This is going to be revenge, revenge, revenge. He's had 17-plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 5 games. They also just gave Brashard Perriman 2 touchdowns back in Week 9 and over 100 receiving yards. So I think if this could be a revenge game, it's going to be one for Brandon Cooks. So get him into your starting lineup.
I hope Bill Belichick is not upset with him still for whatever reason because he sent him away. But I like Will Fuller in that game as well. But let's take a look at the tight ends if we could for a moment. And it's just Travis Kelce is the no. There's some tight ends with some pretty good matchups this week. TJ Hawkinson, Hayden Hurst, Hunter Henry. Logan Thomas has really been coming on over the last couple of weeks. I know he had a slow start to the season, but he's really been progressing. Dallas Goedert with Zach Ertz, not expected. Zach Ertz not playing in Week 11. Tyler Higbee on Monday night is another good option too. And I will say this, if you play on a platform that allows you to put Taysom Hill in the tight end position, you should start him. That's all I'm going to say about that. And that was 15 for 15 presented by Geico. Now, every hero needs a good sidekick. Batman had Robin, Han Solo had Chewbacca, Maverick had Goose, though thinking back, okay, that might not have been a great example, but we've got some sidekicks who won't make you hit the eject button. NFL Fantasy Game Day takes you into the danger zone next. And by God, that's Ryan Tannehill's music. Oh, he's on the bench. Tannehill, what happened, buddy? You've been so good for so long. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day. All right, for those of you who don't have the Steelers defense and need to go out there and find somebody off the waiver wire, the Chargers might already be gone because of the Jets, but the Vikings, Dolphins are pretty good options. The Browns, even without Myles Garrett, the Eagles are still giving up a lot of sacks and turnovers. The Washington FT going up against Rick. We love Joey Burrow, but let's be realistic. Washington FT has been playing well. And Denver, outside in the cold against that team from South Beach, I kind of like playing them as a sit. I had them as a sit on Monday night, and then I switched it. Hey, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day. Adam Rank, Kimmy Checks, Marcus Grant. If you have a question for us, be sure to hit us up on Twitter at NFL Fantasy, or if you're watching us on youtube.com/NFL, Michael F. Florio is there answering questions and, just being a general good guy, because that's what he does. So be nice to him. Only I am allowed to be mean to him, but let's not let Florio have all the fun. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we will answer here. Some of the fan questions coming to you. Cousins or Wentz this week, Marcus? Who are you going with?
As much as I may live to regret this decision, I'm going to say Kirk Cousins. Part of it's because the weather's so nasty there in Cleveland. I do think the Eagles might try to run the ball or kind of go with short passes. So I'm going to pick on the Cowboys defense and say Kirk Cousins.
I don't know if you can hear my boy in the background. He did not like that pick at all. James Robinson, James Robinson or Juju. Kimmy, which way are you going?
I'm going to rock with Juju on this one. I think that the Steelers are going to be ahead. I think that Big Ben, who I'm advocating as a QB starter, is going to be slinging him to Juju. He's kind of usurped his performances at the first beginning of the season where he wasn't so hot. He's been really good, getting double-digit fantasy points the last few weeks. So even though I also love James Robinson, I think Juju this week.
Yeah, tough matchup for James. Giovanni Bernard or Miles Sanders. These are two of my favorites. I'm sure you probably have a solid RB1 like Alvin Kamara or somebody like that going. Miles Sanders is going to be my initial lead with Myles Garrett out. I do like Giovanni Bernard. I would start him in a lot of places. I think he's just outside of the fringe of an RB1, but I kind of like Miles Sanders just a little bit more this week. All right, so good luck to you, Samuel. Corey Davis or Josh Reynolds in a half-point PPR league, Marcus?
I think I lean toward Davis in this one. I don't like the matchup against Tampa Bay, first of all, and I feel like Reynolds is further down the pecking order in his wide receiver group than Davis is in his own group. So that's where I'm going with that.
Fair enough. All right, one last one. Mike Evans or Mike Williams? Kimmy, who do you got?
Rank, I know you like Williams, so I kind of want to be spicy and say Mike Williams. I think he has way bigger of a boom or bust potential. I think there's so many mouths to feed for Tampa Bay that maybe it's Mike Williams this week.
Love it. No, I like Mike Williams a lot this week, too. That Rams defense is no joke. Okay, hopefully those guys will be fantasy heroes for you. We have some of our own, some sidekicks who could help you get some huge fantasy points this week. I'm going to kick us off. I want to take a moment to talk about Chase Claypool. I think that he's been one of the best rookie wide receivers this season who obviously gets overlooked. He has 9 touchdowns. People just aren't talking about that enough. We did a deep dive on next gen stats this week. Actually, I made somebody else. No. We got together. We did some looking because obviously Chase Claypool is good on 9 routes, but he leads the NFL with 3 touchdown receptions on slant routes. He leads the NFL with 4 slant targets inside the 12-yard line. This is why James Conner has not been as great as a guy with near the goal line. So I love Chase Claypool this week.
Okay, Chase Claypool. What a dope rookie, right? Like, this was not the performance or, the huge breakout season that I thought a lot of us expected, even though he's amazing. But I want to talk about a hero who popped up on the injured list, but he is cleared to play if you looked at our active and inactive board earlier that Rank mentioned. It's Damian Harris going up against the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans, they're allowing the most rushing yards per game in the NFL this season. They've also allowed a top 12 fantasy running back in 6 of 7 games this season. Now, Damian Harris has had 100-plus rushing yards in 3 of 6 games that he's played. He's also had over 12 fantasy points in 2 of 3 games. Now, I understand that Cam Newton also uses himself as a running back, and that can kind of hurt the usage of the other running backs for the Patriots. But if you were to pick one who is the lead back who's not Cam Newton, it's Damian Harris. So I think now that he's active, even though he did pop up on the injured list, he's a good, solid start against the Texans today.
Well, Rank, you went with Chase Claypool. I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, I guess they're both the sidekick to Deontay Johnson, if you will. I mean, Claypool is the wide receiver 17, Juju's wide receiver 19, and has really come on lately. A couple of back-to-back games with 20 points. I think both these guys will find a way to eat against this Bengals defense today. The Jaguars defense. Yeah, either way, they're going to eat.
No, I love it. I think that you can start all those. You can start all of those Steelers wide receivers and get them into your lineup. And those were our fantasy heroes. Good luck to you. Now, check this out. Who doesn't love a good comeback story or a bounce back story? Like, did you know that Walt Disney's first cartoon was a failure? Then he came to LA with just $40 to his name. And now I have numerous Disney Funko Pops sitting here behind me, which leads me to the natural transition of asking you, which down on his luck player will pop for you this week? Yeah, that's my bump. That's next here on NFL Fantasy Game Day, presented by Geico. And there is Joe Burrow, the man I was just besmirching a moment ago, talking about starting the Washington. Listen, I like the Washington FT defense. They're good. It's nothing against you, Joey. You're my guy. Now he's not even looking at me. This is how bad our relationship has gone. This is how bad it's fallen. Here is the notable actives and inactives for this week. Teddy Bridgewater, Christian McCaffrey will not be playing for the Carolina Panthers. Again, there was a lot of confusion about Teddy's role coming into this contest, but PJ Hill will be the starting quarterback. He was Matt Rule's quarterback at Temple. DeAndre Swift also not playing in that game, nor is Kenny Golladay, but Matthew Stafford will be there. Damian Harris active, as is Sonny Michel for the New England Patriots. And Joe Mixon was placed on IR, which means another opportunity for Giovanni Bernard. Again, it's not a great matchup, but sometimes you got to play good running backs with poor matchups. Hey, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day, presented by Geico. I'm Adam Rank. That's Kimmy Chex. That's Marcus Grant. Now, we've seen some fantasy stars take a little bit of a hit over the last couple of weeks, but you know what? They're due for a redemption story. So let's talk about a couple of them here this week. And let's start at the quarterback position. Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson. I'm not saying that they're terrible quarterbacks, but they've had a couple of weeks with some rough production. Marcus, if you were going to trust one of these guys, who would it be?
For me, it's going to be Lamar Jackson. The Titans' defense has had some holes, especially when it comes to the running game. And I do think at some point the Ravens have to look around and say, we need Lamar Jackson to run the football more. Their secondary has had its issues as well. I know that's the reason that a lot of people have been sort of preaching that Marquise Brown could have a nice game. So I think Lamar is probably more set up for a bounce back than Deshaun this week.
Yes, what Marcus said, all of that. Plus, I mean, I understand that Lamar Jackson hasn't been on the same MVP run that he had last season, but he's still the fantasy quarterback number 9. So I think we need to pump the brakes on this conversation that Lamar Jackson needs to be faded or he's not a must-start every single week. Speaking of holes for the Tennessee Titans, they're allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. And if you look at what Lamar Jackson did last season in the 2019 playoff game versus the Titans, he put up almost 27 fantasy points. So I think Lamar Jackson is an easy must-start and will have way bigger of a bounce-back game than Deshaun Watson.
Now, I agree with both of you. I think it's Lamar Jackson, but I do want to say that Deshaun Watson has been playing very well since Bill O'Brien has been, deposed. And last week was the first time we really didn't see a great game from him, and it was because of the weather. I mean, that just happens. And so I look at this situation with Deshaun Watson. I feel like you have to get him back into your lineup. He's been so consistently good over the last number of weeks. You give him one, you give him a mulligan. That's fine. It's not that big of a deal. So I would start Deshaun Watson. I would not start him over Lamar Jackson, but I'm just saying, if you're worried about Deshaun Watson, you shouldn't be. But let's talk about his wide receiver, because Will Fuller also did not have a great game last week. Again, I would say it's because of the weather. And then we have Michael Thomas, who's been battling injuries. He's now got a quarterback situation. We don't know what's going to happen. So Marcus, which one of these wide receivers would you want to play?
I went back and forth on this one, and I think I ultimately landed on Will Fuller, mostly because of the quarterback uncertainty there. I do see a situation where Taysom Hill can get the ball to Michael Thomas consistently, but I'm going to just say Will Fuller because I think that for the Texans to be successful today, they've got to throw the football down the field. They've got to take their shots. Now, it looks like Stephon Gilmore's probably going to be back for New England, which is going to make this a little bit more difficult. But I think the Texans realize that to jumpstart this offense, they've got to get the ball in Fuller's hands. They need him to make some big plays. So I look for him to have more of a bounce back.
Okay, my dogs are barking because they know that this is a controversial topic. No, on Fantasy Bites on Thursday, we asked the same question, and I stood up for Michael Thomas. I stood on that hill. I said he's going to have the bigger bounce back, and then Sean Payton named Taysom Hill the starting quarterback. But I'm still going to make a case for Michael Thomas because, like I said, I do think that Jameis Winston is probably going to get in and have some snaps in this ball game, which will bode well for Michael Thomas. I know we make fun and we pick on the Falcons, and I'm going to continue to do it. They've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. They're also allowing the 2nd most receiving yards per game to wide receivers this season. Michael Thomas has had such an up and down year. I'm sure wants to have a revenge moment to show everybody that he truly is a number 1 fantasy wide receiver. This is the game where he's going to do it. I understand Will Fuller probably has a little bit more safety because we know that Deshaun Watson is his quarterback. But I stand up for the people I like. I like Michael Thomas. He's going to have a bigger bounce back. Whatever.
Hey, slants are harder to throw than people think, so I'm hopeful that Taysom Hill is able to do that. But guess what? Time now for fantasy insurance presented by Geico. Just a reminder, there are 4 teams on a bye this week: the 49ers, Giants, Bears, and Bills. So let's talk about some players that could be fill-ins for you this week. Marcus, why don't you lead us off?
I'm going to go with Logan Thomas as potentially a sleeper this week. As we can, look, I know we talk about the tight end situation being sort of a mess there. And I said earlier in the year, it felt like Logan Thomas was basically just out there getting his steps in because he was playing snaps and running routes, and they just weren't throwing him the football. But lately, they're throwing him the football. And he's got a really good matchup this week against the Bengals, who've given up the second most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So we have been sort of weirdly big on this Washington FT offense the last few weeks. And I think you can sort of add Logan Thomas to this list.
I think, the situation happening for the Washington football team, a lot of fantasy guys have become more relevant with Alex Smith starting at the quarterback position. Logan Thomas is one of those. Rank, this guy I know you're going to love because I think you tweeted and you said he was going to be like the #1 running back or something crazy. It's LaMichael Pirine going up against the Chargers today. I like this one. I know. Look at that smile. Look at Adam Rank's pearly whites. Look at him go. It's because since week 6, you have to look at his production. He's averaging 10 touches a game since week 6. He's also averaging 13.5 routes a game since week 6. Going up today against the Chargers, they've allowed a top 15 fantasy running back in 7 straight games. I know this guy's name is a little bit deeper in some leagues, but I really do think that LaMichael Pirine may just be that dude for the Jets.
Yeah, every season, there's always these running backs who kind of come on at the end of the season that can help carry us to fantasy titles. I like LaMichael Pirine. I also like Salvon Ahmed starting for the Miami Dolphins this week. Not only does he have a great matchup going up against the Denver Broncos, who've allowed a top 12 fantasy running back in 3 consecutive games and a top 20 running back in 5, but the one thing that we've really noticed about this Miami Dolphins offense is that they lean on one running back. This happened when Myles Gaskin was carrying the rock. They leaned on him. They did not go to other running backs. And now that Ahmed has come on and proven that he can carry the load, they're going to continue to go to him. And I know everybody on Twitter wants to ask, well, what about Matt Brady? You're overreading into things. If a coach is telling you that he trusts the player, believe the coach. So I love Salvon Ahmed this week. And that was Fantasy Insurance presented by Geico. Now, coming up, you have burning questions, like in Toy Story. If Buzz didn't think he was a toy, then why didn't he just talk to Andy about being a space ranger? Oh, I mean, you also have some burning questions about fantasy football. Fine, we have that too. NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico returns in just a moment. Oh, got it. Have a say in this year's Pro Bowl vote presented by Verizon. The Pro Bowl might look different this year, but the best players will still be recognized. Show your love, cast your vote, and make sure your favorite players still earn their place in the 2021 Pro Bowl roster. Vote today at NFL.com/Pro Bowl vote. And there is Ben Roethlisberger. Could he be a Pro Bowler? You know what? I know he's had 2 games with at least 25 fantasy points, but Big Ben is the guy who always seems to set us up. Like, he starts getting onto a roll, and we're like, oh, we're going to trust him. Like your friend who is a huge flake and never shows up, and then he shows up for golf 2 weeks in a row, and you're like, oh, okay, we'll see you there next week. And then the next week, you're sitting there on that first tee, and he's not showing up. That's Ben Roethlisberger in a nutshell, and welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day, presented by Geico. Rank, Checks, Grant. How you guys doing? You guys good?
Good.
All right, everybody's good. Everybody's good. But listen, we got some burning questions in the fantasy football community. A lot of things to kick around here. You know, I'm gonna start us off here. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys offense has not been great over the last, year, and it's worse now. But Andy Dalton is back. I'm wondering now, can we trust these Cowboys receivers going up against the Minnesota Vikings? Obviously, the matchup is pretty good. The Vikings have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. I like CeeDee Lamb this week. He was the guy who was the most targeted receiver when Andy Dalton was the quarterback. I think him and Amari Cooper are guys that you could play. Zach Martin, this can't be terrible, right? The Vikings are, Marcus, you'd agree, the Vikings are garbage, right?
Their secondary is ungood, correct, yes.
Well, what do you think? Do you think you can trust one of these receivers this week?
I can get down with CeeDee Lamb, as you mentioned. I wouldn't be terribly afraid of starting Amari Cooper, although I would say that at this point in the season, and I think we've all come to this conclusion, you just have to lower your expectations point production-wise from what you thought early in the year when Dak Prescott was there. But I do believe that Andy Dalton being back can get the ball to those guys a lot better than what we saw with the Nooch or with what's eating Garrett Gilbert earlier in the year. So I have some amount of faith in those guys.
Are we going Cowboys receivers, Kimmy?
I'm going to tease it. There's something later on in the show where I hype up one of those guys you speak of, so I don't know. Ooh. You have to wait and see.
Marcus, let me ask you a question, though. Obviously, the Cowboys wide receivers are giving us a lot of problems. Do you think it's a bigger question with those Panthers receivers?
I do, because at least with the Cowboys receivers, they're getting a starting caliber quarterback back. And look, I shouldn't say it like that, because certainly PJ Walker, he had a great run in the XFL. We just don't really know what to expect of him here in the NFL. And so I think that uncertainty makes it a little bit more daunting right now. I think, especially with the Lions being so bad in the run defense area, this is an opportunity, I think, for Carolina to really lean on Mike Davis, get him a whole lot of touches, maybe ease Walker into the game. So it makes me worried for Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, especially those two having been so inconsistent. I think if there's one guy that I still have a little bit of faith in, it's Curtis Samuel, just because they have shown that they can be creative getting him the football, especially as a runner down near the goal line.
Rank, I have a question. Wait,
please.
Can I ask something quick? Because I have a question for you and Marcus. So if you guys are saying that there are some concerns over DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, who are wide receivers that could still be available on the waiver wire or who are on your bench that you would trust to start more?
Well, for me, I would say Willie Snead.
Yeah, Willie Snead. I actually, during the break, went and grabbed Nelson Aguilar for a league to slot him into a wide receiver spot. So that's a couple right there.
Yeah, there's some pretty good options right there. And another question I think that we're having, and Kim, why don't we throw this to you? What are we doing with Melvin Gordon if he struggles today?
I mean, it's been so hard because I think there were a lot of high expectations. We thought that it was going to be a split backfield between him and Phillip Lindsay. Phillip Lindsay was out dealing with an injury, so we thought Melvin Gordon, finally, it's his time to shine. But he's had fewer than 5 fantasy points in 2 straight games and fewer than 13 fantasy points in 4 straight games. He's averaging almost 12 fantasy points per game this season. That's 28th amongst running backs, which I thought that his average would be even worse than that. Now, Philip Lindsay, he's averaging 10 touches a game since week 6. That's way more than Melvin Gordon's usage. So I think if he doesn't perform and play well today against the Dolphins, because they've also been really tough on defense the last few weeks, it may be time to just have him on my bench or try to deal him away, because I don't know if I can go on and win a fantasy championship with him as one of my starting running backs.
Yeah, it's a tough situation with that whole backfield. Philip Lindsay, I don't know if we're going to be able to trust him or anything like that. But those were the burning questions here for Week 11. And as Fantasy Game Day rolls on, we're going to be talking about our top running back and wide receiver starts and sits, boom or bust players, kind of like Nicolas Cage movies, where they're like either really excellent or they're terrible. Let's be honest, all Nicolas Cage movies are awesome. As is our advice, NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico rolls on. And there is Giovanni Bernard getting ready. He is going to be the starter this week. Joe Mixon put on IR. Giovanni Bernard, also his birthday, so let me serenade him with a little tune from Goldfinger. His name is Gio Ronnie. Okay, I didn't want to get an ASCAP violation, but Giovanni Bernard, start him this week against the Washington FT. I'm begging you. And time now for 15 minutes to kickoff, presented by Geico. My singing voice is a little off today. I wasn't warmed up. I didn't know I was going to have to do an a cappella on command. But Teddy Bridgewater, Christian McCaffrey will not play for the Carolina Panthers this week. I know there was a lot of confusion about Teddy Bridgewater. He is inactive. PJ Walker is going to be the starting quarterback. Matthew Stafford is going to be the starting quarterback for the Detroit Lions, but will not have Kenny Golladay or DeAndre Swift. Damian Harris expected to be active, or is active, for the New England Patriots, expected to get a lot of production. And of course, we just talked about Giovanni Bernard a moment ago, getting another opportunity to start for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that was 15 minutes to kickoff, presented by Geico. And welcome back, everybody. Adam Rank, Kimmy Chex, Marcus Grant, and of course, joining the show right now, Michael F. Florio, who has been answering questions. And how you doing, Florio? Everything good?
Everything's good, Rank. I hope this shirt, it has trees on it. I hope it is floral enough for me not to get kicked off the show today.
Well, you're here, so obviously it passed muster. So we do appreciate that. Now, you've been answering questions all morning. So let me ask, before I ask you who was the most asked about player, let me give Kimmy and Marcus an opportunity to try to take a guess at it.
I'm going to say Taysom Hill. And if it isn't Taysom Hill, which it probably was Taysom Hill, I'm assuming people are wondering which waiver wire quarterback or streaming quarterback they should start this week with some guys being on a bye and being injured.
I'm going to go with it being a running back. I'm going to say that a lot of people are asking about Savon Ahmed this week.
Ooh.
That is a good guess. I fully expected it to be Taysom Hill, but it wasn't. It was a running back. It was Naheem Hines. A lot of people are asking about Naheem Hines and if he can be trusted this week as the Colts' leading running back. Some running backs that I said I would start over Hines, Kalen Ballage, Gio Bernard, Duke Johnson, Damian Harris, and Savon Ahmed. But I said I would use Hines over the Lions running backs, the Broncos running backs. I don't want to touch the Ravens running backs, so I was saying them over those guys, just to name some.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael F. Florio. It looked like you were having such a good time. Why don't we answer some fan questions right now? If we could kind of flow those in right now. You know what, Michael F., I will give you the first opportunity here. Parker or Crowder, flex full point PPR?
I'm going to go with Jamison Crowder there. It really hasn't mattered who the quarterback of the Jets has been this year or who the slot receiver has been. They just love to pepper their slot receivers with targets, and Parker's really been trending down since Tua has taken over for Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting. Who is it? Anyways, Richard Rodgers or Gerald Everett in the PPR there, Marcus?
I don't love either of them. I think I'm going to go with Richard Rodgers just because it seems like Carson Wentz has sort of had more of an eye for him. The Rams passing game just has left me wanting more, and especially with Everett splitting time with Higbee, I'm staying away.
All right, fair enough. All right, next question. You won't get this one often. PJ Walker or Alex Smith? Kimmy, where are you going?
I love this guy. Eric, what are your options here? I'm going to rock with Alex Smith, though. He's coming off of his highest passing yard per game that he's ever had in his career. He's been very consistent lately. I think he's been averaging like 15, 16 fantasy points. Nothing crazy, but I think way more consistency than PJ Walker, who's not been a starting quarterback as of late.
Yeah, Alex Smith coming off a career-high 390 yards, but Florio said he was garbage on Friday, so I don't know. Anyways, I'm joking. Florio did not say that. I'm just kidding. Cam Newton or Aaron Rodgers this week. I guess I'll answer this one. I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers. There's not a lot of quarterbacks I would start over Aaron Rodgers outside of the obvious, like Patrick Mahomes. I would have done Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson on Thursday night. And Justin Herbert is actually the only other quarterback I would start over Aaron Rodgers. I don't think this is not a necessarily great matchup for him, but I'm going to go ahead and start. And Jakeem Grant was the receiver I was trying to think of for the Miami Dolphins, who's been playing well since Tua took over. But guess what, guys? It is time now for Sunday Funday! Marcus, why don't you get us kicked off with a guy who's going to pop off this week?
I'm going with Big Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, we saw him earlier coming out of a break, and I think this is a great matchup for him against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their secondary has struggled. We talked about how much we like their wide receivers, whether it was Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster. I think all three of those guys should be heavily involved, and I think Big Ben is going to be really big today. Maybe just, in the neighborhood of 30, 35 points.
All right, well, if it's not going to be Big Ben, maybe it's going to be that receiver he just threw the ball to previously in that B-roll. What about Chase Claypool? Rank was hyping him up earlier. I think this is an option. Now, he was the top scorer back in Week 5 when he had 42.6 fantasy points. Who says he can't do that today against the Jacksonville team, who are allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers and the 3rd most receiving yards per game to wide receivers? Chase Claypool, the rookie, have yourself a day and be the Sunday top scorer.
Yeah, this one may seem a little bit obvious, but I think Dalvin Cook is in a position to explode this week. I think the Vikings could be playing with a lead going up against the Cowboys, and I know he was held in check last week, but the volume was huge, so I'm expecting him to once again find the end zone, and as someone who really needs him to go off this week, I'm hoping he comes through.
You know what, Michael? I'm going to follow your lead. I'm going to go for an obvious running back just because I think we need to talk about him, and that's Alvin Kamara. If there is one player who is quarterback proof, it's going to be Kamara, and he's going to be expected to lead this offense no matter who is taking the snaps. And you know what? Here's something crazy. Maybe it should be Kamara just taking direct snaps. Have you ever thought about that, Sean? Just give him the ball. Like, cut out the middleman, directly snap it to him, and let him go out and do his thing. So we're very confident with those Sunday studs, the Sunday Fun Day players of the week. But let's talk about some star players that let's start talking about some players that we might be worried about. And Kimmy, there's a quarterback that has you concerned. Who is it?
Right, so I've kind of alluded to it a little bit throughout the show. It's Deshaun Watson. We were debating who's going to have a bigger bounce back game, Deshaun or Lamar Jackson. We said Lamar, and it's because Deshaun, he's not been great this season. Yes, he's still the fantasy quarterback number 8, but these aren't the same numbers that he's been putting up all season long. I think this is a tough matchup against the Patriots, who have allowed only one top 16 quarterback in the last 7 games. So though I'm not sitting him, I don't think he's going to have that good of a performance this Sunday.
I got another quarterback, and it's Tom Brady. And we came into this season saying that Brady, I think, would be great to play in good matchups and a guy you'd want to avoid in bad matchups. And this is a bad matchup. I mean, so far, that is sort of how things have worked out for him. I just don't like him against this Rams defense. Makes me worried about his wide receivers as well. I think the running backs will be fine. I think I like Fournette a little bit in this one, but I'm staying away from Brady if I can.
I'm worried about Todd Gurley this week. I know with the state of running back, maybe you have to start him, but he's only gone over 90 yards once all year. They're not really using him in the passing game. It's been the touchdowns keeping him afloat. 40% of his fantasy points this year have come off of touchdowns. The only problem with that is the Saints have allowed the fewest rushing touchdowns to running backs this week, and this season, and his schedule going forward just keeps getting tougher. So I hope you traded him while you had the chance.
Yeah, a touchdown-dependent running back going up against a team that doesn't allow touchdowns. That's good. So, at the risk of upsetting, give me checks, I'm going to have to say that Michael Thomas does have me concerned. Not that he's not an excellent player. I think this is the same argument that we were always going over when OBJ, trying to figure out when we're starting him. This is a tough one. I mean, can Taysom Hill throw a slant pass? I really need to know. But here's the problem. If you paid the price in your draft, and I did that in one league, you gotta start him. It's just like I didn't throw away good money for that Cobra driver to sit there and leave it on the bag when I'm on the tee and be like, oh, I'm gonna hit my 3. No, I'm taking the driver out and I'm swinging it. So that is what is going to be happening right here. Let's talk about some must-start running backs though for Week 11. Florio, why don't you get us started?
I think Antonio Gibson is a guy that you should 100% look to get in your lineup right now, going up against the Bengals, who they give up a ton of yards to running backs. They're in the top 5 in rushing yards allowed to running backs right now. They're giving up a lot of fantasy points, and we've seen in recent weeks when they get near the goal line, they're not going to shy away from feeding their big back. So I think he could score a touchdown or 2 today. I really like Antonio Gibson this week.
A guy I love is Mike Davis. Now, we know that P.J. Walker is starting for Teddy Bridgewater. We're worried about the Panthers' receiving core, so that bodes well for Mike Davis. Christian McCaffrey still not playing. He has such a favorable matchup today against the Detroit Lions. They're allowing the most touchdowns to running backs this season, as well as the most fantasy points per game to running backs. Mike Davis is an easy must-start and should blow up today.
I do think this is a nice week for Mike Davis to bounce back. I'm also really big on Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week, and I know he's sort of not been great the last few weeks. Part of it is that the Chiefs just haven't needed their running game to really be involved. But I think this week, against a suspect Raiders run defense, I do expect we'll see more of the running backs. I expect we'll see a few targets for CEH, and this could be sort of a nice game to get him back into your lineup.
I'm going to be going with Nick Chubb this week. The Eagles have allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points against running backs this season. They've also been more but they have been more vulnerable over the last couple of weeks. But why? I have to say that I love the Browns offense, right? I know, which is like, it's a weird thing to say that you love the Browns offense. It's like admitting to people that you love Vanderpump Rules. But you know what? Now you know. I'm letting everybody know. So you know what? I'm out here. I'm just letting everybody know about that. Let's talk about some must-start wide receivers for Week 11. Marcus, why don't you get us started?
For Week 11, the guy I really like is Justin Jefferson. And he's been great pretty much all season long for fantasy managers. I will sort of pat myself on the back by saying I thought he would be the highest scoring rookie receiver this year, and he could still certainly reach that pinnacle. But I keep wanting shots at that Cowboys defense, and I want a guy who's leading the team in receptions and receiving yards, and that's Justin Jefferson.
I like that call, Marcus. I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson here. I think all three Steelers receivers are in play today, but Johnson is my favorite. When he stays healthy, he just gets the most targets, and the Jaguars, those targets can become a ton of points against them, as they've allowed a top 15 wide receiver in 3 straight, and they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to the position since week 7.
All right, Rank, I'm with you on this one. I know he was on your starter board for wide receiver, and he better pay off for us. It's Marquise Hollywood Brown. Now, I know he's been inconsistent all season long, but the matchup is there today against the Titans that allow the 2nd most points receivers. They've also allowed the 2nd most receptions per game to wide receivers, as well as a top 20 fantasy wide receiver at 7 of the last 8 games. So Marquise Hollywood Brown, if you don't do it for us today, you're on the bench for the rest of the season. So please ball out.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way with Hollywood Brown. But you know what? I'm going to talk about Keenan Allen here for a moment, because we always talk about how great Justin Herbert is, and we make big news out of his haircut. But Keenan Allen has kind of flown underneath the radar this season, and he's just been fantastic. Ever since Justin Herbert took over as the quarterback for the Los Angeles Chargers, he's scored at least 20 fantasy points in every game up until last week, where he had a little bit of a downgrade. And you know what? He still scored 12 fantasy points. So I think that was a pretty good. I mean, he's just so consistent, and he just doesn't get enough love, and I think he should. In any event, let's talk about some boom or bust players, some guys who could go off or just give you the donut. So who are we going to be talking about here, Kimmy?
All right, I alluded to it earlier. I'm going to go quick on this one. It's Amari Cooper, because going up against the Vikings, their defense is basura. So please start Amari Cooper. Andy Dalton is back as the starting quarterback. I think that bodes well for him. He's had 15-plus fantasy points in both of the games where Andy Dalton has started this season. So if I had to pick my favorite Cowboys receiver, it's Amari.
I like it. I'm going with DJ Moore here, and it has to do a little bit with the quarterback, PJ Walker. I'm hoping he throws up a couple of those YOLO balls like you guys were talking about earlier. But even with Teddy, DJ Moore is shown to be super boomer bust this year. He either goes for single digits or catches like a 50-plus yard touchdown. So I think he is very boomer bust in this good matchup.
Well, I'm going to go with James Conner in this one. And maybe it's not so much a boom or a zero, a donut sort of thing. But
no, it's a
really
donut.
The difference between James Conner having a really good day and a not so good day is whether or not he gets in the end zone. And so I think that, there's always a chance that he gets that work near the goal line, that they don't give it to Chase Claypool. And if he finds his way into the painted area, it ends up being a pretty good day for him, I think.
Yeah, that is one of the things about him. Again, I think it goes back to Chase Claypool, just running those slants. They've become enamored with that for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, for me, why don't we just close the show with talking about Taysom Hill? And I know a lot of us want to go out as heroes, and, Hill is a hero's play. Like, I would still advise, if you're playing in a league that you actually really care about, this is such a tough one to go with. Like, at best, he's what? He's Tim Tebow reincarnated. Like, that's basically what it would be. And there's a very real possibility that he gets pulled in the first couple of minutes. It's like when you're watching episode 3 and Dooku gets killed immediately he's still Anakin at that point. He hasn't become Darth Vader just yet. Although some would say that that's the moment he becomes Darth Vader. But there's a chance that he could get yanked and Jameis Winston ends up being the starting quarterback, which means you can't start either one of these guys. So I do want to, by the way, and I just had to do this while everybody was off, when we were off camera. I had to make sure that DeAndre Swift was not in the line. I remembered at the last second while we were going, Florio was talking about, Florio, I missed what you were talking about. And I just was like, oh, my God, we got to go and get DeAndre Swift out of my lineup. So I made sure I saved the day. I did make that move. So now my partner, James Coe, won't be mad at me for doing that. But thank you so much for watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. We appreciate you hanging out with us every Sunday morning. Good luck to you here in Week 11. And we will see you next week. And there is Cam Newton. Cam, I put a lot of faith into you this week. Go do it. And good luck, everybody.